What's up, folks? Casual Dad here with another X-Wing video, and this time I really want to touch on model painting, repainting, or painting in the first place. As we're moving forward in the new future of X-Wing, we're unlikely to get any kind of official product release anytime soon. So if we want ships to run on the table, like it or not, a big part of the future of the game is going to be painting naked bare plastic models or resin models or repainting things. Yeah, so painting is going to be a big part of the game. And of course, there are going to be professional painters out there, experienced painters out there who've been doing this for a long time, who can really bring their A game. And I'm going to show off some of my better pieces. But I do want to make sure to go ahead and make this as not scary as possible, right? Because painting and repainting has been a part of the X-Wing community for a really long time. Hence my lovely Gold Squadron Paint Wars t-shirt here that is much loved. And it's not new. So we have a lot of stuff to pull from. There's a lot of stuff out there. But it's a very consistent refrain when I talk to folks in the community about model painting that it's a scary thing, that they think that they're not capable, that they can't do it, that it's not something they'll ever be able to do. And that's a shame. I don't want that to be a barrier that keeps people out. I want to make sure that if someone is not able to pay for or get some professional painting done, but they can get their hands on some bare models, that they have some basic techniques to get up and running and get things that look nice on the table without too much effort, maybe build their confidence to do something more advanced, but just to, show it off a bit. There we go, both thumbs, got to set my frame correctly. Woo! We're gonna move this shirt so we have a nice background to see the models in. And I want to start with your basic tools, right? So one of the most common mistakes that folks makes is with brushes. And one of the big things you do is you go for like super, super fine detail work and you get a teeny tiny brush like this guy right here. The camera can't even focus on it. It's super, super, super small. And this one's beat to heck because I used it a lot. The problem with a brush like this is that when you put the paint on it, you can't control it. So even if it does do a tiny line, it doesn't go where you want it to, and it does no good at all. If you want that same level of detail, you actually want something like this. And this is a Citadel M layer brush. It's one of the most common brushes out there, and it's one I use by far the most. And you can see that brush is huge. But when you get that wet and get just a little paint on the tip, you have a ton of control with this, and it's been a really big change for me when I learned this particular technique. Another thing too is that there are a couple pieces of paint, there are a couple styles of paint to use that aren't even brushes, and we'll get to that in a second. But that first one that we talked about, if you want like a really, really fine detail, like the dot of an eyeball, for example, much better than a brush is either a toothpick or we go up to a paint pen. And there are some really nice paint pens out there. There's some really bad ones too. And I wanted to make sure to show this off because these are incredible. They are so good and miles beyond any other paint pen I've used. You can use these instead of brushes. If you've ever seen any of my my Legion Clone Army pieces, Grand Army Republic, I use those a lot for the detail work, and especially for the Ahsoka Legion, like red helmets with the white on it. I did that red and white completely with those paint pens, and they are so good. This. So you actually get a very fine controlled point. This is a really good piece to work with. Great for edging, great for some of that detail work I talked about. It's not going to give you the same control that a brush will, but I mean, if you're new to painting in a pinch, they're much more forgiving than paintbrushes. Then finally, the last two, well, one more and then we'll get on to the finally. The other brush that I use a lot is a really janky, big, wide brush like this one. This is an M base. This is used for putting on your base paint if you're not using a spray paint. So if you're just dry brushing on, as they say, with no water or thinner, putting it onto a model, this is one of your bigger pieces. I use this for wash. And I'll talk about washes a bunch here in a minute. The final piece, the final tool that you're gonna wanna make sure you have in your tool belt, and I'm probably gonna find others too, but rattle cans. So a base rattle can, I use a lot of the GW Citadel ones, but I've also really enjoyed, especially recently, this bad boy right here, this Army Painter Silver, this plate mail metal. You're gonna see some of that here in a second, but I wanted to go ahead and highlight you can do a lot with rattle cans. And now I'm actually going to get into showing models, and then I'm going to show some of the other tools and paints that I use to go ahead and do that. So you take your bare base plastic model and you spray it with a rattle can. You want to shake the heck out of these. You want to shake them. I think it says in the instructions to shake it for a full minute, which is hard. So I'll shake it, flip, shake it, flip, shake it, flip, switch hands. You want to get these shaken as thoroughly as you can as much as you can possibly stand it without losing your mind. You want to shake the heck out of those so you get a nice even coat. And then when you do the spray, this is unpainted, so no spoilers here. You hold it about like this distance away, right? So not directly on it. So you don't want to do this in a place with wind. You don't want to do it where there's a lot of humidity. You want a place that's well ventilated but sheltered. So you don't get a bunch of wind, and so you get a nice even thin coverage that doesn't cover up the details. And you just go psh, 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 psh. Sound effects helpful, right? Yeah, it's good. Yeah. Okay, now getting into the actual models, the reason I mentioned the rattle cans is if you have your base plain old plastic to initially coat it with a new color that'll hold paint really easily, you want to hit it with a rattle can first. That base paint allows other paints to actually stick to it and let you actually control it. Whereas you may find that if you don't do that first, a lot of your paints are going to run and they won't actually stick where you put them. They'll just kind of flow across the model and you'll get potentially a cool artsy effect, but yeah, it may not turn out well. Another trick I wanted to make sure to introduce, this is one of the first things I want to talk about, is a zenith highlight. So looking at this guy, I sprayed him first with black, or excuse me, silver actually. Silver, and then I actually did a little bit of darker black on the top here to really highlight the contrast. And then I did that white here. Now you can see there's already a contrast in colors, and when you paint this, especially with thinner layer paint, that texture, the shadows, the contouring is actually going to show up. So you could put this guy on the table and he already looks better than your plain old unpainted base plastic, just for that, the layering, the context there. I've got a couple others like that. This one's a little more extreme. I speed painted a bunch of these zombies and you can see that intense contrast already, and that's literally just two sprays with the rattle can. Hit it all with the black and then let that dry, and then a little bit later I just hit it kind of at an intense angle like this, just one dash over it with the white, the wraith bone. And I wanted to show this guy because I did a bunch of these guys speed painted with this exact technique. I wanted to see how quickly I could paint 20 of these zombies, which usually takes forever. And this next guy I'm going to show you has just that zenith highlighting and then literally one other liquid wash over it. So this guy, it's the black on the whole thing, and then I did a little bit of that white spray over, and then I just hit this with what's called a Reichland Flesh Shade, which is just a very, very wet paint where all it does is soak into the recesses and shade the model a little bit. And this is already a perfectly serviceable model. You could have the most, oh, and I also painted this, no, I didn't even, that's just white. So you could just paint the silver and then there you go, serviceable model. It shows you the details of the model, shows you the textures, makes it very clear what it is. And there's literally no brushwork in this at all. I mean, yes, I did just douse it in shade, but you could just easily dip it in a bucket and it would come out just fine. This is an example of a 3-step model that comes out looking really good. And at your minimum basic level, this is something you should certainly strive for. It is way better than a base plastic model, and you can really play with this too. Some of the other things out there, there's a painter's putty you can use to block off parts of the model. So when you're doing your zenith highlight and you're spraying, some parts of it are not hit at all. You can do little thin strips of masking tape. There's a lot of stuff you can do to play with this. And again, not use any brush skills. Don't even need steady hands. This is just one of the things I really wanted to show off and highlight. Now, after this step, you can go a little bit further and start painting additional colors. And I made about 30 of these guys, and this is just super, super basic. I did, I think, 20 of these things in like an hour, maybe 2. And you see that combination of that super intense zenith highlighting, which really brings out the contrast of the fingernails, especially if I don't add any other color around it. And then you've got like just a single color silver on here, single color brown on here, and then a brown wash to bring out some of the textures. Now, I wanted this guy to be really basic. This is a pretty straightforward thing that basically anybody can do, and it looks really good, especially what we'd say tabletop height down here. If you're looking at this guy from a distance, you're like, that's a zombie. I don't want to be anywhere near that. So this, again, is a really easy, very simple technique I wanted to show off. Before I get into the more complicated stuff, I wanted to highlight those techniques in particular and just show a couple of these. I made a bunch of these, and so I wanted to go ahead and highlight some of them here. And these guys, of course, you can do a lot of touch-up. You can go much further on this, but I wanted to keep them very, very simple just to show off kind of how powerful these very basic techniques can be. And these are faces inside ships are even easier. And one of the key things that I mention a lot is that you want to make sure you want to let the model do the work. And I'll talk about that with some of these paints specifically in a minute. This guy was down below. It's very dark on the bottom, and then I sprayed mostly white from above. And you see the folds in the fabric here really stand out. And again, that's just the rattle can and a wash. I didn't go in and do any extra edge highlighting here. That is literally just the wash. And then, of course, the greens and the red I did do a little bit. So but incredibly quick, easy paint job. I'm really, really happy with how these turned out, and it was super easy. So do not be afraid of painting. You'll do great, just like this guy. All right. Now let's look at some of the more advanced pieces just to go ahead and do it and show it. This is one I did where I used all of my techniques still a couple years ago, so I could probably do a little bit better than this now. But again, solid colors, washes, and then a little bit of highlighting and things. So like this is, it's white paint, did a black wash, and then went back in with just a little bit of white in the lightest areas to kind of highlight that smoke effect. But really it's the black wash going into the recesses that gives you that smoke effect. This is much easier than it looks. And I'm very proud of how he turned out, and I really like it. And again here, light brown color, silver on the barrel rings, and then just a darker brown wash in the recesses, and maybe just a little bit of sponge work on the sides to give it some extra texture. But again, I'm very proud of this, way easier than it looks. I did this guy in an afternoon, just sat down in a couple hours and did him because he was a surprise again for my wife, and I had to be sneaky. So that's a quick one. A couple other extra quick tips to go ahead and throw in there. This is my typical painting setup. You've got some water for rinsing because I mostly use water-based paints. You've got your base paints. This one I really, really like, this game color. This gray will go over anything, which is pretty cool to have. Games Workshop or Citadel also came out with this contrast, which this one doesn't need to be thinned, and it's meant to go on in just a single thick coat. This is really cool. It's like a mix between a colored paint and a shade. So you get some of that textured effect I was showing on those zombies, but you don't even need to do a wash, especially if you use a lighter contrast than black. This is black, so it's pretty intense. But then those washes I mentioned, they come in different shades too. So like this is a brown, a rich brown shade that we're gonna see, and then this is a redder shade. This is Caribird Crimson. And I wanna show what both of those look like on some models, so I wanted to go ahead and demonstrate what they look like here. And again, they're basically just dirty water. You dip in there and you paint all over that sucker, and then you can go in and clean up or skip some spots if you wanna get some extra detail work in there. Now I've got one more model before I get into the actual X-Wing ones. I know you're disappointed here. This is one of the old Micro Machines Star Trek miniatures, and I actually did this as like a showcase of what it looks like, the out-of-the-box store-painted model. So when we have these conversations about pre-printed models, pre-printed model paint quality really, really sucks. So like this is what it came out, like no texture, just completely flat. Some of these like flow out of the recesses. And then this is just, I touched it up. I literally just washed it, and then I went in and did a brighter blue, a little bit of extra red here, and then maybe just a little light brushing over the top of it with like a copper color, and just look at how much more vibrant that is. I love this piece. I love being able to show it off as just an example of these repaints are easy, and just look at how much the detail stands out. Like the model's fine, but the paint job is lackluster, shall we say. And again, super easy. This was really easy, and you let the recesses of the model do the work. One quick trick I like to do with something recessed like this, you go in here and you're not very careful with the yellow, and you just take your thumb and whoop, wipe over that, and it should stay high enough because that's inset a bit, that the yellow will stay in, and whatever you missed around the edges will just come right off. That takes some practice, but it's a really handy technique, and I use it all the time with X-Wing models. All right, we're ready for the main event. I'm gonna go in order of the ones I painted. And with some of these, it was pretty funny because I will sometimes get an idea in my head and not be able to get it out until I do it. And that was true of this guy very early on. This is my first edition Jumpmaster, and this is a thing where I saw the model and it just screamed at me like this skull motif, and I could not get it out of my head until I did it. And at the time I was using a ton of this bronze color with that brown wash I showed. And then I really liked golds and metallic colors. So what I did here is this is just a light brown, and then I put a little bit of copper on the metallic bits, washed the whole thing, and then just did a very light bit of gold brushed over the top of some of these shinier metal pieces. Now obviously this could be better. The white freehand on the black is a really challenging thing to get right, and so you can see how those edges are a little bit rough. You can see the paint strokes on it. It's not like a really great paint job, but from here, it's very eye-catching, very dramatic. It's just a cool looking ship, and I love the way it presents on the table. And then of course I repainted the engines here to give it a bit of that glow. This right here is just yellow in the socket. I did just Oh, how did I? Yes. So I started with the lighter color. I should have done the other way, but yellow in the socket, a little rim of red and orange, and then I just watered down some paints around the edges and just kept doing some layering there, and then made sure I had a bright yellow dot in the bottom of each so that really stood out as like a glow effect. Again, a lot easier than it looks. Just a matter of like watering down your paints and then just going in over and over again and doing some cleanup, where here, like I did this very messily, did the thumb trick, and then this is yellow, and then I did a really heavily watered down brush with a little bit of orange paint on it. Just put it in there as just like a liquid wash to blend with the yellow. And that again is a really easy technique I use to get that. And you see I messed up a little bit here and left it a little messy, but glow effect, it's fine. It's intentional. So that was my first one. I'll leave him here just a little bit, peeking out. And then to match that, I started making that the theme of my squads. And I was flying a lot of Jump Masters, and then I flew a lot of Kimagilas. And this one, you can see this is really rough. I really should have watered down the paint a bit to go ahead and have this blend a little bit more. But this is really just a freehand white pattern, washed with the brown, and then went in with a layer of just the yellow and orange and red. And one of the advantages of this being kind of a rough paint job is you can see exactly what I did. And now I could have blended that a little bit more, I still can, but what I did at the time, it again is very effective at tabletop height. It looks like a wolf skull coming to get you. It's a very, very intimidating Kimagila, and I really love the way this guy turned out too. Did not do the engine repaint on this one. I just painted all those fuselage engine bits that bronze, put some of that wash on there, and then just painted the bottom black. I think this one I actually rattle can sprayed the whole thing black, and with X-Wing miniatures, you put them on the base and you have this terrific way to just hold it up and like turn it into the spray paint. Very handy. Have him just peeking out just a little bit over here too. Now, continuing in that, I then got to some that they didn't inspire me the same way, where I didn't see in my head what I wanted it to look like, and I just was like, all right, I can do this model in theme, and I ended up with this guy. Which again, isn't bad, but I want to come back and take another look at this guy. I don't know that this works as effectively as the other two, and it's still a cool model, so I kind of want it to. But this was a more experimental one. May revisit, may redo, we'll see. I do like how I tried to do some of the lighting effect here with just some yellow there. And again, up close, it looks pretty funky. But then if you get down here, it looks really, really good. That tabletop height does a lot of magic, and you should really be proud of what things look like here. Because if you do all the fine detail work in the world that looks amazing here, you're not gonna see it because it's, you know, over here, covered in tokens. Me. All right, next up, let's see. And now I actually am having some trouble remembering what I did next. Oh yeah, here we go. This is a ship that I actually repainted twice. This is my Lancer. I flew Ketsu Onyo and Still Flyer now that she's back in X-Wing Alliance. I had another paint job for her that wasn't at all in theme. It was the first thing that kind of stuck out to me about the Lancer, and it had a lot of like different patterns and colors all across it. But looking at it, it's a ship that really needed like a very streamlined, very basic paint job with some extra trim and exercise here. So I wanted it to match my Jumpmaster over there in the color and theme, and so I did just that base color, that high contrast green canopy to make it really stand out. Some of this orange glow effect on the engines, and the same thing I did in the front of the Jumpmaster. Start yellow, then really watered down some orange, mix in a little bit of red. And you can see how Slavio was here. It's on the other side, nobody sees that. You can see the brush strokes. So I do also want to highlight the points I did wrong, just so it's really clear, like you can mess up, nobody cares. This is all practice, it's getting better at it. And if it gets you a ship on the board that's not naked plastic, you know what, go for it. I was proud of this one. This is actually the one that I submitted as my Gold Squadron paint? GSP, yeah, the Gold Squadron paint contest. This is the ship that I submitted because I just finished it, and it was the most recent one and had kind of the cleanest, most striking paint job. And this got me in there, so. And now I really have trouble remembering what I did next, so we'll just kind of, there was a big gap before I did any other X-Wing repaints. I just wasn't as inspired to do it. And then I took one of these, one of the, I believe this is one of the most wanted, like the on-release Z95s, so this may have been the individual Z95 expansion. And I was flying a lot of Bosk, Scum Bosk, and so I wanted to do a repaint that looked like the Bosk on the pilot card. And I'm very proud of how this turned out. It's definitely a bit on the dark side. I think I did too much wash and maybe too dark of a brown. But this, again, just spray painted the whole thing with that tan rattle can. This guy here. And then I went in and just darkened up these nacelles a little bit. I did this brown nose as carefully as I could, and that little indent there is also brown. And then a rough silver on that. And then I just hit the whole thing with a dark brown wash, and it came out more or less looking like Bosk. And then, of course, I did a little extra silver around these. Like, there was some detail work on this, but not very much. And this is one of my favorite repaints. It looks just like the pilot card. It stands out. It doesn't look like any other Z95 out there. This is a really good one, and it's not a great model. So I'm going to talk a lot more, and I've said a little bit already about letting the model do the work. This is a case where the model still does the work, but not the same way some of the others do. And the Imperial stuff I'm going to show, I will definitely show off what that looks like. Getting that contrast side by side. Another thing too, I get a little bit of gloss varnish, and I'll do just a thin coat of it on a canopy to add a little extra shine, so it makes it really look like a shiny piece of the model. And if you have other parts of the model you really want to stand out and shine, that's a nice technique to go ahead and just make those stand out a little more. I'll go ahead and keep these kind of ringing around here, and I gotta check and make sure these are in frame, not too in frame. Oh man. Okay, and then next, in theme, this is actually prep I did for Worlds 2024 when I went to Adepticon and did the World Championship. And I had a ton of Y-Wings. I have a ton of Y-Wings. And Lima and Arlise, I think, are two that come up a lot. And then there's a lot of cool Y-Wings, but this paint job it's fine. But since I was using Lima all the time, and Lima was a top performing Y-Wing, I really wanted to do justice to the Lima pilot card. And so I got this one. And this also is one of my favorite paint jobs. You can see that gloss varnish shine on this canopy. It really stands out as you rotate the model around and draw some attention to that canopy. This had a little bit more detail work, but I want to be clear how rough this was. So like this blue smeared a bit, this brown smeared a bit, and a little bit of cleanup on the edges, and then the wash hides a lot of those imperfections. So if you're doing the detail work and getting frustrated with things being a little bit sloppy, don't be afraid to go in and do a little bit of cleanup and try doing some washing steps to let that kind of blend it all a little bit. It looks so much better than the paint job is detailed. And then similar effect, I painted this hole in with a really sloppy dose of white. And then I went in with like a really watered down red, and we ended up with those very pink nacelles, just like Lima's on the pilot card. And of course, a little yellow dot for the astromech here. There's a tiny bit of extra brushwork on these brown stretches here, but again, that was fairly rough with a little bit of cleanup and then some wash. And that, again, is one of my more effective repaints, and one of the cooler ones because this looks like a pilot card in the game. You can look at this and players that have played for a while be like, that's Lima Kai. Oh my goodness, I know who that is. Which is kind of exciting. I enjoy my more unique repaints, but that was my first foray into doing repaints of actual pilots and having them come out the way that they should. Next, we got a little bit weirder because we got into Rebels. Because I did those in prep for Worlds, and I did end up, I think, using the Lima, but it was my whole Oakland, because I did Rebels instead of Scum. My bad. But so we'll look at the Rebels, and this guy's a little janky, actually. Here's your sort of classic standard X-Wing. One of the older paint jobs, this has the flappy wing, so I'm pretty sure this is 2nd edition, but I'm not totally sure. I had a Luke Skywalker. I was planning to run 2 X-Wings and probably a Luke and a Wedge, and I wanted to make sure that my Wedge stood out as different. And so I did this. And here, this is literally a dot of gloss varnish on the canopy, little red on the astromech, and then a brown wash, and that's it. That's it. That's all I did. I didn't do anything extra fancy to it. Just that wash over the whole thing makes it very clearly the standard X-Wing paint job, but, distinct. You put them side by side, it's clear that one is different than the other, and that shows on the tabletop. It's a way to differentiate them. If you wanted this exact same effect on a naked resin model, you would take your rattle can, spray that sucker with your whatever color you wanted, your light color, your white, and then hit it with a wash, and you get a very similar effect where the textures will come out. They look really good. There is no need to overcomplicate that. You could do a little black on the canopy if you really want, or instead of doing the brown wash there, you can do a black wash and just do that a couple layers and let it get deep. And again, the wash is a liquid, so it'll settle into recesses. Do a couple layers, you can really darken it up. And that's a way where you can get a similar effect without getting too complicated. And a lot of these do some extra detail work. This guy probably doesn't flex as well as he used to, and all these painted, so I'm not gonna break that. We'll just let it be. Our quintessential X-Wing. I'm glad I have an X-Wing repaint to show on the X-Wing Miniatures chat, so. And then we get a little bit weird. Another very basic repaint. I talked about the paint pens. Some of those paint pens have extra dramatic effects, like a chrome. I found some truly good metallic chrome paint pens. And if you just want to show off like a single DFS and make it like this is clearly a special one, please don't shoot me, I'm just special. This was fun. I found the pen and wanted to test it out. This model already had those hazard stripes, and I was like, you know what, let's do it. So this is just a paint pen, and that's it. I didn't do anything else to this except that. And I wanted to highlight it because it's very sparkly. To this day, my only Separatist repaint so far, sort of. We'll touch on that in a second. Next, I did some Rebel repaints, and I absolutely love A-Wings, but I had the blue paint scheme that I never really liked, and I was running Tycho, custom Tycho in the A-Wing. So I did this guy, and Tycho, Captain Tycho, is also a very famous character in Warhammer 40k as somebody who lost half his face in a very famous battle report in White Dwarf and went a little nuts and put a golden death mask over it. And so I did this just freehand. And this is a whole nother technique where I just painted these shapes freehand and just do a little extra detail work on that. This is not a fancy freehand, but that it's a mix of that bronze and gold, it really stands out and makes the model shiny, especially in contrast with this black. And again, you see that shiny canopy because of that gloss varnish on it. This was a fun one. I especially am tickled by it because of how much crossover there, or like blending of different fandoms it is. So that was fun. And then next, you probably already saw it, but I wanted to run Sabine from Phoenix Squadron, and I wanted to pull the details out a little bit. I already had a Phoenix Squadron A-Wing that had like the green on it, but I added the brown wash to pull out some of the recesses, and I added a brighter green to make that really stand out, and that gloss on the canopy. This is one of the most basic repaints I did, by a mile. I didn't even touch up the engines. It was really just wash, a little green, a little wash on the green, gloss varnish on there, and it's a very distinct, standing out, like gritty A-Wing that matches my Tycho and works really well with my the way I fly Sabine as kind of a lunatic jouster, which I swear works. Underrated pilot, Sabine A-Wing. She's absolutely incredible. And then I did actually paint my almost my buddy's entire World Squad too, where he brought Empire, and I really wanted to highlight Empire models. If you're looking at ties, they are so easy to repaint. Take this model, hit the entire, assuming it's a bare plastic or resin model, hit the whole thing with a gray or a navy, like that dark imperial gray blue color. Hit the whole thing with that, and then hit it with a black wash, and all these recesses will come out, and you'll be basically done. If you also just messy black the canopy too while you do that. And then this is one of those cases where I talk about the model doing a lot of the work. These panels are recessed and they're a different texture than the rest. So if you're going in here with a brush trying to match these details, the model will actually pull the brush to the places it's supposed to be, and there's a barrier there that'll block it from going out. So painting these individual tie panels is one of by far the easiest things to paint freehand in X-Wing miniatures. These are amazing. Again, this is not a repaint, this is just your stock tie interceptor. It's got a sunken magnet that none of my bases are magnetized, so I don't know what to do with that, but ties are amazing. I could paint ties all day, every day, and crank these suckers out insanely fast. I say that, don't call my bluff there. This one was really fun. So I was going for a hot, bright pink, and I ended up with a wine party look. But this is just a very, very basic Imperial repaint. I went over the entire thing with a bright pink color, and it ended up being kind of a redder pink. It's this guy right here, Pink Horror. You would think that this would be a very pink. It's actually somewhat of a redder pink. And then I hit that with a pink wash, that Carrowbird Crimson, and it came out with this very cool, deep wine party color. And I did this Vader first and was like, all right, you know what? I could deal with that. That looks pretty good. But that's it. So I hit the entire model with that pink, then I washed the entire model, and then I went back in and painted these individual panels black. And like I said, that contrast paint, this one here, that black contrast, flows really freely, covers really well, was perfect for filling in these details because it was still kind of black. I just needed a little bit of covering there to bring that out and make it a clean black. And you can see how well that turned out. Similar here. I actually didn't touch this canopy. I painted all the way around it and didn't mess with it. So that is not the best example because that was already done for me. If this was a naked model, I'd have to do that too. And what I would probably do there is I would paint the whole thing a darker gray, the entire thing, and then hit it with a very dark wash a couple times, and then maybe do some spots with a toothpick to clean it up a little bit to make sure it was a nice clean black. Or I'd go with a different color and really play with that. But yeah, this one came out great. I've got this guy, a bomber, a defender. I never did get the Reaper painted in the same scheme, but they got a lot of compliments throughout the World's Weekend, and I was very happy with this one. TIE Fighters, a dream to paint. If you are hesitating on painting X-Wing and you have TIE Fighters to spare, paint some of these guys. They are a delight. Now we're wrapping up here. I've only got a couple more repaints to show. If you're still with me, appreciate it. Hopefully this has been fun. But I wanted to show this guy and talk about another kind of advanced technique that I've been toying with. So this is your stock Scum Fire Spray. I think this is a second edition one, but it might be a first edition one. It's hard to say. You got your Boba Fett paint job. And with this, I saw the Book of Boba Fett and wanted to get cheeky. I was planning to bring a Boba Fett list to Worlds. I did bring one to the Lone Star Open in Dallas, or the Dallas area. And so I had 4 of these. I had 3 Scum ones and 1 Separatist one. And I was like, how do I make this stand out? Like, it's such an iconic ship. How do I make mine cool and weird without doing something that's just like a color change? Like, I didn't want to do a Cath Scarlet paint job because I don't think it looks good. So I got pretty weird. There's a tool called Green Stuff. And this is liquid green stuff. This is for filling gaps and blending in cracks. I don't necessarily recommend this, but there's like a 2-color clay where there's a blue and a green, and you rip them and you mix them really well, and then you mold and putty and then like sculpt with a knife to make actual shapes. And you can mix that with pieces of a model or other model pieces to get pretty weird. So this is an experiment. It was my first time fully crafting something with green stuff, and I actually took 2 Tyranid Genestealer arms and put them on here and then just glued them in and then sculpted them up with some extra green stuff. It clearly gets the shape of the Rancor, especially the nostrils and the teeth. Not super happy with how the rest of that came out. It looks a little bit weird, but it is very distinctive. And of course, just to really tie it all together, I added the tail just for fun. So if you want an eye-catching, memorable model, especially if you have extras to play with, I repainted the engines too, just for fun. This was fun. This is a fun experiment. I still love it. So when I run a fire spray, I run this one because it is, especially with Boba, because it is extra intimidating. So people are like, oh my God, what is that? And it just comes barreling at their faces. This is definitely a fun experiment. Last one, and then I'll be done for tonight. I absolutely love the Gauntlet model. And I actually really love the Gauntlet paint job. Like, I really love the base Gauntlet. But as you can see, most of my Scum repaints are in this like brown, dirty sort of theme, and then I've also done a little bit of experimentation with pink. And it was a particular challenge because it is covered in flat panels. And big flat panels are really hard to do because they will show your brush strokes and they're very hard to clean up. Textured bits, smaller bits are a lot easier. This one, you're definitely gonna see some of those paint strokes. But again, you're gonna see if you look up close, and if you're looking at this thing on the table, you're not really looking for brush strokes. You're like, oh my God, what is that? Keep it away from me. Yeah, so this one's cool. And this one, I did the entire thing in this brown. I want to say I did that with a brush where I had a brown base paint that I did with that layer brush, did the whole thing with that. Then went in and did these gold panels, these pink panels, this green around here, some of the trim in the black. And then I washed the entire thing with a brown wash to smooth it out. And I'm still kind of working on these highlights and channels. This was a lot of that thumb technique where I did a very watered down paint there and just went like that to clean it off the flat planes. This has been a very fun project and experiment, and it's a very striking repaint. It's not my cleanest, it's not my best, but it's still like, it's a lot of fun. And I can come back in here and clean this up sometime, but I just really enjoyed tackling something this big. This is like a precursor if I ever wanted to do an epic ship and wanted to paint that big. I didn't want to paint a YV because it's not a very interesting model. And it's already in my color scheme, so I'm not terribly motivated to mess with a YV. So here we go. This is an example of some of the more advanced techniques you can get, and every single advanced step you do looks very, very weird until you keep going. Like if I blend these a little bit and do like a brighter dot in the corner of each, if I do a little bit of weathering powder on here to make it look just dirty and dingy, those are things that would really bring this together. But it's a very experimental piece I'm still kind of toying with and playing around with. So there we go, my Gauntlet. My Scum Gauntlet, and that is it. That is all my ships. I did actually go into this, when I planned this video, I was gonna do a live repaint of one of my IGs. I kind of want to repaint both of them. And I've had a color scheme in mind for a long time, but in setting this up, just the physical setting up the camera thing, I don't do a lot of this. So it took me a while to get around to this just because how do? So this is up there on deck. If folks are really interested, I may do an actual painting stream to show kind of how this goes. And you'll get to see me mess up and curse and do some crazy conversation about that. So holler if you're interested in seeing that. Yeah, we'll see. But that's it. Cheers. I hope this has been fun. I hope this has been enjoyable. I really hope that folks who watch this will not be afraid to go out and experiment with repainting these models. Hopefully I've given you some techniques you can try out if you have some spare models, if you get some 3D prints out there. Find yourself a fistful of cheap Warhammer zombies or just cheap Warhammer infantry. You can usually get free Space Marines all over the place. do some painting practice on those just to muck around before you mess with your X-Wing stuff if you want to deal with the confidence. But a couple things I want to make sure to highlight is you can always strip these. It's very easy to strip the paint off these. I would soak them in simple green is one of the common things. It's a degreaser. You put them in a plastic Tupperware, you cover them in simple green, you leave them for like 2 weeks. And then most of the paint comes off. And if you run water over it and use a toothbrush, you can get most of the paint off and start over. Or, like I said, this is a second repaint. I didn't strip the paint or anything. I just painted clean over it and it came out looking very good. So I have not had to base paint the Warhammer or the X-Wing models. I've only done it if I wanted to start over with a different color, or I was just starved for time. So I wanted to go ahead and just start with a clean slate and do it. But I will say with some of those, that's bitten me, where I did the base spray, and while I was letting it dry, I kind of lost interest. And now they're just like plain black sitting in my my ship thing. I'm pretty sure I have a pure black Seek, whatever it is, and then a Z95 that's just totally black. Definitely have a Curax that I need to go back and paint at some point. And a word of caution on that, I don't recommend base spraying black because you can't wash it. If you base paint with a really dark color, the washes don't really show the textures the way you want them to. And so I would start light, start with a white or a cream. This is a really good one because you can control how dark it gets with how dark of a wash you use after. This is a really good one because it does show the texture nicely and it's very flexible if you want to go lighter or darker from it. It's a nice sort of base to go either way or both. But yeah, if you were to do this and a wash of Caribird Crimson, you'd have a very unique, cool looking ship where you can see all the contours and textures and you really wouldn't need to do anything else to it. Anyway, there it is. Now I'm done. That is my TED Talk. Hope you've enjoyed this. Let me know what you think.